Welcome to Travel Secrets with me, Tanya Rose, the podcast sharing wisdom for fellow travellers. Each week, I ask my guests to reveal their 6 travel secrets and the holidays and adventures that surround them. Today, my guest is the wonderful Melinda Stevens, travel aficionado, ex-global editor of Condé Nast Traveller, founder and creative director of Salt Lick, author of Secret Stays by Asseline, which is the most wonderful book. And if you haven't already bought it, you should be buying it for everyone for Christmas. It is the most beautiful book. It features 22 extraordinary places owned by the most remarkable people. With her incredible list of places that she's been both at home and abroad, I really could not have a better guest on Travel Secrets, and I am so honoured that you said yes. Welcome, lovely Melinda.
Oh, it's so nice to see you, and it's very nice to be here.
And welcome to the Peninsula Hotel.
I know, what a revelation. Obviously, I drive past it the whole time, and I've seen it kind of, rising from the ashes, but it's extraordinary now that we're in this kind of silver pod.
I'm so happy to have you as my guest. Before we go into your travel secrets, perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and how travel has impacted the person you've become.
We were always traveling from when I was a little girl. My parents are big travelers. That was the kind of beat of our lives in a way that wasn't really about hotels. It wasn't about staying in fancy places in by name. It was about fly camping in the Mara or the Serengeti. It was having wonderful guides teaching you the most extraordinary things. There was glamorousness to it. Of course, I'm suddenly thinking of the days when my stepmother used to take us to the Cala di Volpe in Sardinia and all of the wonderful people smelling of coppertone and covered in gold jewelry and a wonderful waiter there. I remember showing us how to peel an orange in one piece. But yes, we were always on the move. And I think once you have that nomadic beat in your veins, it's difficult to let go. And also I'm pathologically curious and I'm pathologically optimistic and I'm pathologically overexcited about everything. So I can't really stop looking around corners. But those corners that I look around now can be very close to home. I have had a kind of shift in my understanding of what can be exotic and what can be of meaning, even just what's under our noses.
And we don't travel enough actually on our own doorstep. I think actually lockdown did do a lot for that, didn't it?
Yes, hugely. Funnily enough, it was something that I really, really was beginning to question in my own existence as we flew thither and hither around the world globally, announcing this place or that was the place to be. And in fact, lots of those paths were getting so incredibly well trodden that I was happier and finding more discovery, because really travel is about discovery in that sense of peeking into something that you didn't really know was there and meeting someone that you didn't really compute existed and learning something new. And in that lack of discoverability, because everyone was everywhere, I had started looking at other places and trying to find value in them. So, but partly that was exaggerated by COVID. You're quite right. People were suddenly exploring on their shores. I always laugh about this because really, really posh English don't go abroad. Really, really posh English, as you know, have always found abroad very common. So the posh Brits have always gone to kind of Scotland and, the Outer Hebrides, et cetera, et cetera. But suddenly I think the rest of us were also going, well, wait a second. Let's marvel at Cornwall. Let us marvel at our own coasts. And as a consequence, I've done a lot of exploring around the UK over the last few years.
There are so many places that you've been to all around the world. We're never going to get to all of them, but let's go into your travel secrets and start off. What is the number one destination that you think everyone should go to once in their lifetime?
I think the place that probably lives in my head rent-free is Egypt. because it's just such an extraordinary civilization that existed and thrived for many thousands of years BC. And going there was kind of as we were coming out of COVID. So it was a trip that we'd organized as a family, big trip, all the kids, my stepmother again, who's the kind of matriarch on these adventures, and we'd had to delay it because of COVID, and so finally we could push the button on it. So it had that extra tang in the air. I won't forget arriving in Cairo and coming across. It must have been some kind of motorway over on a motorway, and underneath us was some thriving. It was a night market, and every single street and every single artery and every single everywhere you looked was full of bustling life and steaming smoke and people and haggling and noise, and I just I just was so exhilarated to be out in the world again. But that was really the beginning of something that I think defies imagination, really, in the sense of we took a lot of boats and we took a lot of planes, and there wasn't a corner we didn't reach. And when you do fly over, you become very aware, and I'm very obsessed by perspective anyway, which travel is plays such a huge part in that. But this literal perspective of overlooking a great ocean of sand. I mean, it's waves and waves of sand as far as the eye can see. And then this blunt, beautiful, coursing river, direct and true. And out of these very simple truths were fashioned some of the most ingenious, mathematically astonishing, most perplexing, monumental wonders. And I remember thinking, oh gosh, I hope the pyramids aren't like Stonehenge.
Yes,
my father was obsessed
tiny.
with Stonehenge, and he made us obsessed with Stonehenge. But when you go to Stonehenge, it's so diminutive, and you can't just. I just want to point people off in a different direction. But when we saw the pyramids for the first time, I really, really felt magic. And then we underwent an extraordinary route on these. I don't know if you know the Nor-e-Nil boats.
No, I don't know them.
I think she's French and I think he's Egyptian, and they're the beautiful old boats with these red and white. God, they're so glamorous. These red and white stripy sails that kind of puff out like kind of pot bellies.
How beautiful!
And you sail down the Nile silently with egrets, fluttering up from the banks of the water. That's a completely astonishing experience in itself, and beautifully handled and beautifully done. But then the sights of Egypt itself, and places like Abu Simnel, great, these huge monumental figures of Ramesses on the outside, and then I remember the guide telling us this one of a gazillion extraordinary facts that you hear in Egypt. I think it's like once or twice a year, the sun moves on a particular axis, or we have a certain relationship to the sun's trajectory, and it shines a light out past these figures into the outer chamber and then into the inner chamber, and it lights up all of Ramesses and his family, and kept in the dark is the god of the underworld, but the rest are illuminated. And that only happens like you
That sounds
just
amazing.
You're endlessly staggered at how
That's
these
incredible.
people work these things out, and that happens 85 times a day, every day that you're there.
Amazing. I loved Egypt. I haven't been for many years actually, but I've done the pyramids, and I thought they were actually wonderful. And I also went diving in the Red Sea, which was incredible.
Yes, we had a completely hair-raising time diving in the Red Sea. So good for you. There was just a kind of glut of boats that day. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I wonder whether it was a post-COVID. We were in that first boom, and everything was not under control, and we were all down under the water. And we loved diving, all the kids were here, and my stepbrother and stepsister were here, but we were looking up, and all I could see was like,
Boats.
the boats, and but also not all of them had their engines on.
Oh, no.
So we were just really freaked out that day. It was a tussle under the water.
I do remember doing one night dive there, and I'd never done night diving, and I thought, I'm a bit scared about this. But I went off the back, and as my back hit the water, I was like a cartoon character. I have never got out of the sea so quickly because I just literally suddenly had thoughts of Jaws and everything.
Panic.
It was
The panic
pitch black,
set in.
and it was just
yeah.
no, not for me. I love diving in the day, but definitely not a night diver.
Well, the night is a completely different thing, as you know, because the infiniteness of that of the Black Sea under the water is incredibly alarming. It's also incredibly mesmerizing, and you're very drawn to it. But it's also its unfathomableness is I can see overwhelming. I was saved on a night dive, I think, from really losing my kahunas because someone shone a light on and I just caught it for a second. There was the most beautiful octopus wrapped around a rock. It was almost like a kind of sculpture, and he shone this light on this octopus, and it moved away, kind of sinuously disappeared. And in that half a second of spotting that creature, I'd never seen something move so exquisitely, and I've been in love with octopuses ever since. And I don't eat them, and
I was going
anytime
to say, no, I'm not going to eat one.
No, I really don't, and I get furious when people do. They're too clever and too
beautiful,
too brilliant, and probably will come from Egypt.
What's your most unexpected travel experience?
Well, I'm going to tell you, it's like a really sweet little secret address that I found with my daughter. My youngest daughter was so funny, actually. It's her birthday today, and we've spent quite a lot of time focusing on vintage and a gazillion earrings, but she used to really, really be into adventuring. And the two of us, every Saturday morning, would wake up and go all over London. She just had such itchy feet, and it fed into my soul at that time. And we found a museum, the two of us, called the Grant Museum of Zoology. It's here in Bloomsbury, and the first time we even came across it, we couldn't even find the door, and I'd never heard of it before. And we kind of pushed and pulled at this thing, and then we went into this room, and in this room was the most extraordinary collection of improbable things. The first thing that we saw was a jar, and it has written on it old labels that are practically stuck on with sellotape. And you know, when the sellotape is ancient, it gets all yellow and tobacco-y and starts kind of peeling off. It was a jar of moles, and packed into this kind of, bell jar of a certain size with hundreds of moles, and you could see all of their little feet. So if you wait a second, so your eyes start adjusting, and then you realize that this whole room, it's not a big room, is full, floor to ceiling, piled high, and in quite a haphazard state, endless boxes and tubes of creatures. So there's there's one, I sent it to my friend the other day, is a penis worm. There's a tiny little worm in the shape of a penis. There was tortoises and turtles. My daughter's obsessed by tortoises and turtles. There was a skeleton of a gorilla, which was extraordinary to witness up close, a kind of petrified jellyfish, funny enough. And then in one room, there's 1,000 on those tiny little, I can't remember what they're called in science, when you put them on a kind of, it's not an agar plate, it's like a little bit of glass, it's put under glass. The 95% of the world's living creatures are in fact these, micro creatures, and they all are illuminated in there, and we just marveled at the world and all of the beautiful things.
How wonderful. I didn't even know that existed.
Yes, a lot of people don't know.
That's a real
Please go.
Travel secret, and we absolutely must all go. What is your most overrated or underrated travel experience?
This sounds very naive of me, but we went to the Galapagos this Easter, and it wasn't really on my, there are places that I yearn to go that I haven't been. But the Galapagos wasn't really one of them. I just, the pictures that you get of the Galapagos are really strange, aren't they? Because they have this very strange set of creatures who live there. There are those oily looking iguanas, and there are the birds with now that I'm saying it sounds really fascinating, but the birds with no wings, and then there are those very multicolored kind of, I call them like Rifat Ozbek crabs that are kind of red and yellow. I mean, they're just incredible, and obviously the giant tortoises and stuff. But I was like, I don't know, it just hadn't captured me in a way. So we went this Easter, and we were on a beautiful boat, and some, there were some places that are just infinitely better by boat. I would say the same was like, gorgeous coastlines like Croatia. If you go by boat, there's something about the quality of the sea, quality of the cliff faces, and the interaction between the two that are really hard to beat. So the Galapagos is made up of many, many islands, and so we would sail through the night and wake up at a different island every day. And it was so strange. I couldn't really work out if we'd gone back in time, because there's like volcanoes spewing and there's like lava everywhere. So that kind of gave you a kind of land that time forgot weirdness to it. Or maybe it was some future thing because there aren't very many humans there. So you're just like, maybe we're in the post-apocalypse and we've all been wiped out, and we've got to make our way in this world. Whatever happened with that very kind of dystopian experience of this place really sinks into your system. And we spend a lot of time on land, wandering around, coming across these bright yellow, banana-colored iguanas. They were crazy. We spent a lot of time under the water with like sharks and turtles, and we saw, it was really cute again actually, because I love diving. Certain members of my family, they can't deal with the infinite space that we were talking about before. It's the is it agoraphobia? Is it like an agoraphobia? It's like too much for them. But I just got a couple of my daughters in the water, and at one point, but bearing in mind you're surrounded by sharks, right? Yeah. That's a thing in itself. But what really caught us unawares is this huge tuna came past, and it was so bright and silvery, and it was like a creature like made out of tinfoil, and it so captured our eyes, and it so shocked us with this big dark eye. A tuna is not a particularly, it's almost like a fish that you draw as a child, like one of those. It's there's a simplicity to its profile, if you see what I mean, but underwater it was fast and it was huge, and it was it shone like mercury. And I could hear my daughter go under the water, you can't eat, and she took the sharp intake of breath, and it was one of those very special moments. But in terms of the Galapagos itself, it felt so that they talk about the fact that because the animals haven't grown up as humans, as predators, they're very friendly, and that's absolutely true. We had sea lions dancing right in our faces. We had the cormorants wouldn't leave us behind. We had one night a seal came up and plopped itself on the back of a boat. One day we were sailing somewhere, and we just had dolphins and porpoises leaping around us. I mean, I don't know how big the pods were, and we just felt that we were at the ends of the world in a different reality where humans and animals could have lived together. So it was special. And did you like it? I think that's a yes. I think that's a tick, tick, tick. I absolutely adored it. It was extremely heartening. It was extremely wholesome. You're extremely aware of their fragility. But if you can beg, borrow, or steal to get their due. It's extraordinary.
One other thing I remember you telling me, or I read about it, was a train journey
Ooh, I
that
love
you
trains.
did in, I think it was in Russia, that you
Gosh, well
were
remembered.
totally underwhelmed by and actually hated. That
Yes.
one journey. I know you love trains and you love
Yeah,
traveling.
I
but that
completely
one,
obsessed with trains. But this was my very progressive school, aged 17, took us on a school trip to Russia, but it had really, barely opened up at that point. And so we went, a ton of 17-year-olds, and stayed we stayed in St. Petersburg and Moscow, and we took a train between the two. But I mean, we were really kept under lock and key in those hotels. We had meatballs for breakfast, lunch, and supper. Actually, we snuck out and ended up making friends with some local Russian boys, and they took us to their house. That was, oh my God, Tanya, it was just unbelievable. Living in very small spaces, and one of the boys had learnt English from black market Frank Sinatra records. So his way of talking was in this kind of
Strangers in the Night.
strange, brilliant Sinatra and 50s, 60s manner, and what they were living on. And we the streets in Russia, there were people still queuing long lines for bread. We took things like biros. It sounds utterly ridiculous now. Biros and notepads. That no one had any jeans, but we didn't take jeans. We couldn't afford those. But sweets we took and swapped for things like Russian hats. I gave my dad an old fur Russian hat for like a
wonderful.
biro, and we went to the exquisite museums, and oh my gosh, the treasures that were even in the top of the upper area of the Hermitage. I remember coming across that Monet series of dancers squashed into a kind of a cupboard. It was beyond.
Extraordinary.
But the train was between the two cities, and it was a mixture of it. I think we were kind of on hard seats, and all of the Russians it was smoke. Black tobacco, and I'll never forget the stench of that, and I'll never forget the sight outside the window. And of course, at the time, absolutely hated it, and now I just think what a uniquely privileged thing to have done, and the sensory feeling of that will never leave me.
Yeah, how wonderful. Let's talk about food and drink. Food and drink is obviously so important in travel, and we love food and we love drink. So what has been your best meal or your best cocktail, or what sort of things do you like eating, or where do you like going? Let's just talk about food and drink and travel.
One of the cute cute people that I'm working with at the moment is an app called Step Your World, and they are kind of 20-something creative community who give their recommendations from around the world. Fundamentally, it involves places to stay and it involves a bit of culture, but it's fundamentally about places to eat and drink.
Oh, wow.
Because I feel like for someone who's my age, 50s, when we were their age, it was all about raving and music and, going off grid on our travels. I think and I love to see it, the obsession and the curiosity and the wonder that's attached to food in this generation is really great. So through Step, I found places on my own doorstep that I didn't know about. For example, I always give the example of No Drama, which is in the middle of a roundabout out onto the A40. And I'd driven past it a gazillion times because it's just by my house. And I could tell by the typeface, it was a cute thing because it was like in this cool note in the name of it, No Drama. But you would never in a million years stop at that place because it's like literally a confluence of 8 dusty roads, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we're now at No Drama the whole time. They do the most incredible burgers. The owner's a friend. And that was just that example pointed out to me that I just wanted to start exploring in my own hood. And also what Step are really brilliant at is they don't just do, the cool hipster places. Far from that. They'll do, second generation Syrian, or they'll do somewhere that's completely brightly lit and has no Instagram charm at all, but has the most fantastic baba ganoush.
And is it global?
Yeah. It's so good. Take a
Oh,
peek.
I'm absolutely going to download
yeah,
it.
Yeah. And you're geotagged in it. So the platform is really helpful. So anytime I'm going anywhere, I just see where I'm going, or I see where I'm at, and I see what's around me. It's really good. So I've now gone, oh my God, it's just a disaster. I'm eating my way around West London. And obviously there were like big hitters like the Barbary have just come here from Shoreditch, and that's really exciting to see. There's a very little place called Akub, which is Palestinian, which is just behind Hillgate, just off Notting Hill Gate. That's the food. I think there's barely 3 tables in there. The food is so bright and beautiful and lovingly tended to. That's fantastic. And then I went with my friend Tom to this place opened up in Portobello, and I thought, oh God, this is not. I'm specifically looking for places that don't really have charm. I'm specifically looking for undesigned places, and this place looks too designed for Portobello. And I wondered that it was too she, and I knew that it was vegans. But so I went with Tom and I said, look, I just want to check it out because I'm always interested in anything that's plant-based for all sorts of reasons. And I went in. Oh my God, it's not dissimilar to the room we're in now, in that it's silver, but like brushed silver seats and a brushed silver top. And it's with these kind of recessed lights. So it's very, very cool. It's like a mini Bond layer. And then the food was incredible. So good. And it's called Holy Carrot.
So you've traveled so much for your work. What about abroad? Are there any special places abroad that come to mind for food and drink? Do you go back to the same places or the same restaurants or same countries?
We go back to the same places for sure. Because they're a real mixture of high-low. Some of them are really, highfalutin, like the Swiss Alps and the south of France, and that's family really. And I love going to those places again and again in the same way that when I was growing up, that I now bring my girls, because those are the places, and I don't know whether you have this, that you remember every paving stone, every tuft of grass, you remember every smell. And so that yearly, there's that kind of it's not a pilgrimage, is it? But it almost feels like a pilgrimage. It's almost like a rite of passage. My eldest daughter, when we got her passport, right? When you have to like lay the baby down, and when they were like 2 weeks old or whatever it is, and get the stupid photos of them. And we took her to again my family's place in Cap Ferraro when she was like 3 weeks old. So she's gone there every summer ever since, and this is like inbuilt into their bloodstreams, that plant, that smell, that sound of that wave. So I've been really, really lucky like that. And then on the other side of that is my husband's family, and he always used to go to this island in Greece where, I have to say this time around it was properly funny even by our standards, in that the water, the showers had somehow, the water supply had somehow got mixed up with the electric. So every time you got in the shower, you were zapped, and then we couldn't get in or out because the gate was thing, and then the fridge was on the blink, but the whole place was falling apart. The reason why why we love and adore this place in Greece is because it doesn't have any of the, so we all are like kind of Wurzel Gummidge, where our hair is like, we're covered in dust. I'm wearing the same thing every day. We're drinking phenomenal amounts of Kyparoskos out of plastic cups. The beaches are wild. Nothing is expected of you, and we laugh and laugh and laugh. There's a gazillion of us, gazillion cousins and family, and we giggle from dawn to dusk, and it's truly blessed. But God, we fall apart at the seams for sure.
Where in Greece is that?
It's Cyclades, but not any of the fancy ones.
Yeah. There's so many beautiful islands. I love Greece. It's just wonderful.
Yes.
And talking about going back to the same places, I think I grew up in the same place in Switzerland that you did. So going back is just wonderful. And I always go to Rougemont to the surf and have my fondue there, and the Olden have the
Oh my
same things that we had
gosh.
every Christmas and every New Year. So I absolutely
It's it's
understand
it's
that.
it's ritual,
Yeah.
and it's rite of passage, and it's these heavily imbued moments. Yes, the Olden. When we first went to the Olden, was one of my first memories of the Olden, which is that beautiful, beautiful chalet on the High Street in
Yeah.
Gestad. David Niven was there. Do you remember the
Yes.
old?
Yeah.
I mean, it was more than black and white, but and Roger Moore, of course, had a house there, and I remember seeing David Bowie there. Well, that was embarrassing actually because we then went in like hot pursuit of David Bowie, and just like hiding behind, in the shops, and I'm peeking out from behind things. David Bowie sort of thing, but just there's very very these hubs that attracted these people. But for sure, we actually don't go to the Olden now. We go to the place opposite, and I can't remember its name. And that's where we have our fondue. And then we always have a massive row. That's as traditional as the fondue.
Wonderful. What is your best insider travel secret or tip?
I'm obsessed with packaging anyway, which is not probably the correct thing, but I love type, and I love typefaces, and I love the idiosyncrasies of nationalities' own products. So I always go to the supermarket wherever I am, and if there's not a supermarket, or on top of the supermarket, firstly, I love other people's supermarket, their weird air conditioning and the smells of the air conditioning and the weird products that you find on the shelves. I just love looking at how other nationalities eat and consume and talk to themselves through those products, and then of course just markets themselves. I was really lucky. What was I doing? Writing a piece on Peru, and I think that the chef is called Virgilio Martinez, but he wasn't. He had not got all that all that praise and stuff that happened for him at his restaurant in Lima, and so he took us on a tour, me and my friend, of the market. Where they sell all the guinea pigs. Still now, I think they sell guinea pigs for you to eat, and you go, oh my god, I can't believe they sell guinea pigs, but one person's guinea pig is another person's sheep.
Absolutely.
But and way back when I was in Southeast Asia, when me and my friend Jo were traveling, she has really exotic tastes. I can barely eat anything spicy, and it kills me because of that curiosity I talk of. But she would try everything. Her palate's extraordinary. But we would go to the markets and find, oh my God, strange fruits like rambutan, which I still love and adore. They're like a lychee. I don't know if you know them.
I don't know what a rambutan
They're
is.
surrounded by a much more kind of aggressive but rather wonderful tentacled red spiky skin. And I remember that they don't seem to travel, which I'm thrilled about. So yes, go to people's markets, go to people's supermarkets.
I also love a pharmacy abroad.
Oh,
I
beyond.
love a pharmacy in Marrakesh or an apothecary. Yes. I love them. In New York, there's one opposite the Carlisle Hotel, Zittimer's, which has just got everything. And it's in the days when you couldn't get melatonin here. So I used to stock
Oh my
up.
God.
And
Yes,
just
massive
brilliant.
tubs. Well, my friend Catherine Green, who knows about every single product that ever existed in the beauty world ever, is passionate about French pharmacies, as many people are. So I always follow her advice, although I picked up in the summer in Saint-Tropez a cream that was vitamin A, but I keep on putting it on, and now I'm absolutely dry as a husk. And so that was a mistake. And now I'm having to put on another potion actually given to me by a lovely man in Ibiza who looks after bees, and his sister makes a potion out of beeswax and CBD. And I just don't know what to do because it's their last pot. So I'm now slathering my completely vitamin A dried husk of a skin with the CBD and the bee pollen, but I'm running out. And what was it? Showed a beauty discovery that I assumed was French, but because she's called, I'm going to say all of this wrong, Anne de Memile.
Oh, yes, fantastic.
So, but actually my friend has just introduced me because I'm a fan. It's the only thing I can put on my face that doesn't cause an extreme reaction. But she's actually based here in the UK. So I'm really interested on what she produces and how she forages and what she puts in her potions. I'm going to go and meet her.
She is absolutely wonderful. I had a facial with her many, many years ago, and she does a consultation beforehand, which is almost like going to see a therapist.
Yes.
And I started crying before I had a facial. I thought, oh my God, I came for a facial and I'm having a therapy session.
Well, this is what everyone says about her, and what everyone says, therefore, about her hands, and also what she makes. There's, I love her. Gosh, I haven't met her, and I hope this would be a compliment, but, white witches are always good in my book.
She was wonderful, absolutely. And her products are fantastic.
Agreed.
Let's talk about your most poignant travel secret trip.
I did a lot of traveling when I was in my late teens and early 20s, with a backpack and $100, which could still get you everywhere and anywhere, and all of some of those places, whether it was Bali and then going over to Flores and taking a boat, a crazy boat, literally held together with toothpicks, back to Java, or whether it was traveling up through Malaysia and into Thailand and ending up actually in Bangladesh. Those trips were always extraordinary, but the one I suppose that I remember a lot is this island that I came across kind of by accident. I was in Central America. I've been traveling around with my friend around Guatemala and Mexico, and then she had left. She had a terrible motorbike accident, and we had a terrible motorbike accident, as we always seem to do. She had to go home, and I carried on, and I ended up literally in the back of a lorry. I mean, I just think about this thing about, Jesus, these experiences and these risks, but in the back of a lorry, going through, I was about to say, Honduras, and then taking a little boat to this island called Roatan. And it was really beyond idyllic. So I called a couple of friends who'd also been traveling around with us, and then we found a hut, and they joined us. We lived on this random bit of beach in this random hut. And we lived on, we would call it, we only had a couple eggs and bacon, but we call it Begs and Aiken. And that's all we ate. And we get up in the morning and, wash in the sea and, sleep on these kind of wooden decks. And there was a man behind us called Mango Man, and he lived up a tree. He never really once he came down and he was literally like a creature. He was very, very, his legs had totally wasted away because he climbed up and he lived in this tree, and he dropped out. And so we had this very overdeveloped upper torso, and he asked, he'd found this drift, as they called it, when all the drugs wash up on the shore, and he'd found all this drift, and he wanted to use our hob to dry this thing of weed. It was a really weird scene. But then they left, and being by yourself anywhere is always a very high alert, you're highly sensitized to every noise, smell, meeting, encounter. And I ended up doing extraordinary things when I was on my own there. And, one was that night dive and with that octopus. Another one I stole into somebody else's house one night, and I'm not into their house, but and just, watched the moon on their deck. I ended up living next to this pigsty where there were the cockroaches everywhere, and I just had this book, and the only book that was in the room. It was so weird. It was so Evelyn Waugh was this complete work of Dickens. So I would spend the night smashing all the cockroaches with this Dickens. Complete work of Dickens. It was like something really out of a handful of dust. But I also I was so open. You're very open when you're on your own, and for that reason, I encountered extraordinary people, had extraordinary experiences, put myself out there in ways that I wouldn't advise my children to do. But as a consequence, it really felt like living.
That sounds absolutely marvelous. I asked you to bring a photograph. And tell us about the photograph and how that sums up travel for you.
This is a photo of me taken by my friend, my lovely friend Joe, who I did lots of travels with actually, in the Atacama Desert in Chile, and it come about because I was working at Tatler at the time. I really, really was like I left university and I didn't know whether I wanted to be a writer. I didn't know whether I wanted to be a serious journalist. I didn't really know. I knew that I loved words really. That was the summation of that. And anyway, I couldn't get a job in journalism, and for love or money, I did photocopying for literally 7 months, if I was lucky, and making terrible tea for all sorts of people who wouldn't say good morning or good night. It was a really difficult time, as it is for everybody who leaves university. I always say to everyone who's leaving university, you're starting right back at the beginning again, chumps. Anyway, a very, very wonderful editor, actually, I have a huge amount to thank for, a lady called Jane Proctor, got me on board, and I started writing extraordinary pieces. Anyway, it was supposed to be a shoot in the Atacama that I was going to write about, but it was also going to be the cover of the travel guide, and the models didn't turn up. So they said, well, why don't you quickly get yourself into the Galliano dresses, and why don't you take a friend, and blah, blah, blah. So I grabbed my friend Joe, and we went out to the Atacama Desert, which
Brilliant.
was really beyond spectacular in its nothingness, except it was also really like, when you're a child and you draw a map of a treasure island and you go, here are the volcanoes, and here is the secret lagoon, and here's the Atacama is exactly like that. Suddenly there were hot geysers, suddenly there was a snow-capped volcano over there, even though you're in the middle of the desert. It didn't, and none of it made any sense at all. And then, so me and my friend Joe squeezing ourselves into the dresses that were for the models. But which was bliss. A lot of the photographers saying to us, and now can you run away? There was a lot of the back of our heads. I think there was something perhaps.
Further.
Yes, keep going, and more distant, and I keep on running, like literally over the edge of the planet. And that picture is of me. It's obviously like between shots, and I'm kind of wrapped up, and I'm kind of crouching down, and I've got a notebook, and I'm writing in it, and I'm writing the story, and I'm starting in what would then really become much later something that would become a really important chapter in my life and my career, which is being a travel editor. So I'm writing these notes, but above me is that sign, and that sign has that, bendy. And I know it's super trite to go, if I could take myself back to that time. And I don't think I was necessarily aware that sign was there, but I asked actually Jo so she could send me different photos at that time, but we've lost so many. There weren't any photos at that time.
No,
we didn't
it's
take photos.
a brilliant picture because it's the time and place, and that's what you got.
Yeah, and also it's a kind of metaphor, of course, a trite and too neat by half metaphor for there will be some bumps in this road, and there will be some twists around, and particularly in where I am now, like. So I sometimes, I feel incredibly grateful. But half the reason I can feel incredibly grateful for where I am now and what I'm doing now, because what I really love is, and a lot of people say to me, oh gosh, I wish you would write, but I find the writing actually takes a really big chunk out of my goodwill. And it's awful to say it, but I might write something, and I might write it later down the track. But what I really love now is working with brilliant people, and I really love ideas. And at the moment, I get to work with ideas, and I get to work with my amazing team, many of whom working for lots of different people, coming up with lots of different ideas and making lots of different things. And I feel so grateful for that, Tanya. And but sometimes it's the bumps and the lumps that allow you to feel that extra level of gratitude. And as I get older, and I say this again, like I'm an impatient person and I want everything to be brilliant straight away. But as I've got older, I've worked out like you can have a really bad day where everything feels like utterly challenging and utterly annoying and frustrating, and you want to dunk everyone over the head with a blunt instrument. But as time goes on, I have learnt to sleep on it and wake up the next day and come up with a solution. And that gives me great pleasure.
Well, you're such a brilliant person to bring these brands to life, and the people who are working with you are all heavenly. So I think whoever works with you is extremely lucky. I was going to say, where next? Because you've been to so many places. Do you actually have a bucket list, or is there somewhere that you really would like to go to, where you're hoping to go?
Well, I'm really excited because my brother is a huge supporter of ocean conservation, and he runs a charity called Blue, and they've been extremely instrumental in setting up marine conservation areas around the world. They do extraordinary work, and he has taken over a I don't know whether you could call it a hotel, but it's almost like a kind of overwater camp in Raja Ampat, which is, right kind of eastern. I mean, really the other side of the world. My itinerary is hilariously fascinating in terms of how we're getting there. And it's Raja Ampat, for whatever reason, and I don't know the science behind it, and I'll learn when I get there at New Year, still has the best preserved coral reef in the world.
Wow.
So coral reefs, as you know, now are sadly deeply devastated. But Raja Ampat has this incredible coral reef, and there's a huge amount of marine life there as a consequence. So we are going there at New Year. We'll do diving from dawn till dusk. He says it, and it's almost like this, which is a terrible thing to say, but it's almost like seeing the last of the unicorns before. But I feel like it will be, so I feel extremely excited by that. And in cute news, my traveling partner is my daughter Willow, who turns 15 today. And so the two of us are going. I like traveling individually with my girls. It's really heaven. And this is the first trip we've done together, the two of us. And I think we will be on a proper adventure, and I think we'll be under the point of the place is you dive morning, noon, and dark, and I think we'll be under the water, staring at everything extraordinary the world has to offer us.
It has been a joy, a delight, and a real honor to have you on this podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
What a pleasure! Thank you so much, Tanya.